Gather around while I tell you about the worst first date I've ever been on. So I matched with this guy on Bumble. He asked me out pretty quickly, which normally I like to talk for a few days just to make sure we're compatible first, but I was going through a really bad breakup and just kind of looking for a distraction, so I said okay. He had initially proposed a pretty fancy restaurant, and I said yeah, but then the day of, he texted and he was like, hey, Dave & Buster's just opened, would you rather go there instead? And I was like, absolutely. So we had planned to meet there at 6, but then at 5:30 he texted me and he was like, hey, I'm probably not going to be there until about 6:15 because I'm late getting off work. I was like, totally fine. So I'm walking out the door at 5:50 to get to the restaurant at 6:15. And he texts me as I'm walking out the door and he's like, oh, I got off work on time after all. I can still be there at 6. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be there till 6:15. He's like, why? I was like, well, I left later because you told me you were going to get there later. And he's like, well, what am I supposed to do for 15 minutes by myself at the restaurant? And I was like, I don't know. I told him I was going to get there at 6:15 because that's what he had changed it to. So he calls me at 6:10 and he's like, am I getting stood up? And I was like, no, I said I'd be there at 6:15. Like, I'm 5 minutes away. He's like, oh, I'll go inside and get a table. And I was like, okay. Should have just gone home. Lesson learned. So he goes inside to get a table. So I get inside. He's already at the table. He has a beer in front of him and he says he's ordered 2 appetizers for us, mini quesadillas and pretzels with cheese dip. He's like, is that okay? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. He has his beer and he's like, did you want anything to drink? So I start looking over the menu and he's like, loudly, he's like, did you notice that there's no prices on this menu? I had to ask the waitress the price of every single drink on this menu and it's so expensive, you might as well just go pregame somewhere else because like this is crazy. But like, did you want a drink? And I was like, nope, just water's fine. So the appetizers come, the 2 that he picked out before I even got there. And I'm not super hungry, I'm just kind of nibbling on them. He eats most of them. And then he's like, I'm so hungry, do you care if I get an entree? And I'm like, no, of course not. And he's like, well, you should pick one for me. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cute, like, I guess. So I start looking at the menu and he's like, it has to be really low in calories because I have a 1,200 calorie per day limit that I have to stay under. And I'm like, you picked Dave & Buster's, you picked the appetizers, what? So I'm like, okay, you should get the sliders. And the waitress comes over and she's like, did you want anything else? And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna get the sliders and I'm gonna get a second beer because it's happy hour. She's like, okay. She walks off and she comes right back and she goes, oh, happy hour is actually over, but I can still get you that beer for full price if you want. And he holds up his phone and it says 6:59 and he's like, happy hour is not over. I want the happy hour price. She's like, well, our computer says it's 7:01 and that's what we have to go off of, but did you still want that beer for full price? And he's like, no, I want you to go talk to your manager. And she's like, okay. So she leaves. I'm mortified. He's already asked her the price of every single drink and now he's doing this, but like, okay. So she comes back over and she's like, okay, I talked to the manager and he's going to go ahead and give you that happy hour price. So it'll be $1 off your beer for happy hour. And he's like, okay. And I was like, $1? It's $1 off for happy hour and this is how you're acting? Like, it's never okay to act like this, but for $1? So while we're waiting for his sliders, we're chatting and he's like, so what do you like? What do you like to do? And I was like, I like to travel. And he's like, oh, like where are you, do you have a trip planned? And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Vegas in a couple weeks. And he's like, oh, like with family? And I was like, no, just by myself. And he goes, by yourself? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, that seems kind of pathetic. And I was like, no, I really like traveling by myself, actually. And he's like, well, where else have you gone by yourself? And I was like, well, I went to Disney World. And he's like, you went to Disney as an adult? And was like flabbergasted. So I was like, okay, so what do you like to do? And he's like, well, I like to travel. And I was like, okay, to where? And he tells me the name of a lake that's like an hour away and then gets out his phone and proceeds to show me at least, like, no joke, several hundred photos of this lake. It was just like the same picture of the lake over and over and over and like the same picture of a fish over and over and over, like for like 15 or 20 minutes. I was like, So then he's like, does your family live here? And I'm like, yeah, my whole family's here. And he's like, yeah, me too. That's why I get paid so much more than people my age, because it pays to have a dad who owns his own company. Like, that's why I make so much money. And I was like, okay. He goes, do you have any nieces or nephews? I was like, yeah, I have 3 nephews. And he goes, how many siblings do you have? And I said, I have 1 sister. He goes, oh, so obviously she's married. And I was like, nope, she's a single mom. And he goes, 3 kids and she's a single mom. And I was like, yep, that's how life works out sometimes, I guess. And he goes, well, what does she look like? So at this point, the waitress comes over and she's got the check and she's like, did you want to buy a game card? And he's like, yeah, because it's half price game night, right? And she's like, yes, but the cards still cost the same. The games just cost half the amount. So like, you're still paying $20 for a $20 game card, but games that cost like 10 tokens will now cost 5 or whatever. And he's like, but I thought it was half price. And so she explains again and I'm just like, oh God. So he was like, did you want to play games? And I did not know what to say. And so I was like, sure. hoping I could just like get us out of there. So I got the cheapest option, and my plan was to go to the most expensive games and just like run us out as quick as I could and dip. So one of my go-to games that costs a lot of tokens or whatever is Deal or No Deal. So I head over to Deal or No Deal and I start playing, and he's just like making these little comments the whole time I'm playing, and I ended up, whatever I ended up with, he was like, oh, that's a shame you only got that amount. And I was like, okay. And he's like, well, let me show you how it's done. And I was like, it's a game of luck, but all right. So he picks a case, and the first case he picks, it's the $500,000 case. And he's like, yes! And I'm like, interesting reaction, but okay. And like as the game is going, like the higher number he picks, the more excited, like he just keeps getting more and more excited. And so finally I'm like, you only have like the $1, the $2, and the $1 million case left. Like, why are you so excited about this? He's like, well, because the way that you play the game is by finding the $1 million case. And I was like, nope. That's not the point. That's not how you play the game. And he's like, yeah, I think I know what I'm doing. And I was like, okay. At any rate, I was able to run us out of tokens pretty quickly. Immediately was like, okay, I gotta go. No hug, no handshake, no nothing. I was just like, okay, thanks. Have a good night, and left. That was like October, November, and I didn't hear from him again until February, when out of nowhere he texted me, and I deleted his number the day of the date, and he was like, hey, how's it going? And I was like, who is this? And he sends me a selfie, and he's like, it's so-and-so. I just wanted to catch up. How was Vegas? And I was just like, LOL, and blocked him. Okay, that was one of my worst first dates, but like, don't get mad at me when I show up at the time you changed it to. Get mad at me about the amount of calories in the food at the place you picked. Insult my sister, insult my hobbies, brag about how well off you are, and then mansplain Deal or No Deal to me, really, really wrong. Like,